And he is the co-founder and former CEO of Nutanix. And right now, he is the co-founder and CEO of DevRev. Please put your hands together and help us welcome Dheeraj Pandey.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Jeff. And thank you, everyone, for being here. New York is a city of speed, and everything was on the move all the time. So the fact that you've taken a pause to come for this conference means a lot. And it's a pretty jam-packed conference over half a day. And the fact that you're spending half a day with us is meaningful. We've kept the best for the last with George coming and talking about New York Times and design. And Mike Robbins talking about authenticity, which is something that he and I have been talking about, that even the agents, the AI agents, will need a lot of. What does it mean to be honest and not very self-righteous and vulnerable? It's something that will seep beyond humans into machines too. So we look forward to having a great discussion after lunch as well. We'd really appreciate if you could stay back and learn a little bit about New York Times and its history and design. I'm just a big fan of the New York Times. So every morning, actually, Michael and I, Michael is our head of product. We exchange our scores of Wordle, and then he plays connections, and I play the spelling bee. And there's a lot that we actually talk about beyond just Wordle itself. But it just speaks volumes about design. And this conference, Effortless, is really about looking beyond machines, looking beyond code, looking beyond automation and autonomous and augmented and analytics to what does it mean to really bring it all together with design. So while most of the world is going to talk a lot about AI, we are like, what if we talk about design first? So this conference is really about looking at this as a yin and yang of each other. And if anything, I think the case that we want to make today is that just like the CDO and the subprime froth and the .com froth, there's a froth right now in .ai as well, as Jeff was saying. So there's a flood coming, and that flood will take away 98% of the companies. The question is what remains, what will remain, is those trees that have deep roots. And those deep roots for us is very much an operating system thinking. So you'll hear a lot about platform and operating systems because those roots are deep. They'll talk about search, we'll talk about analytics, we'll talk about workflows, we'll talk about a lot of things that actually are things that require deep engineering as well. So the case that we'll make today is that AI is incomplete without design. We really need to think about design as the thing that carries AI over to the other side, because we have to really meld, humans and machines. They're two sides of the same coin now. Obviously, a lot of work on the AI side, not the least of which is reducing hallucination, but also going deeper into understanding context. Like, what does context even mean? And we've worked a lot on context the last, let's say, 30 years of tech, ever since the internet. Talked about cookies, and we've talked about the browser and the browser history and memory. I loved the fact that George in his recent presentation used the word memory for context as well. And I think it's something that's going to be deeply embedded in AI as well if you do it right. But we also have to think about redesign, because, and we've seen this movie before, every time we try to do this in a hacky way, we said, let's now do it the right way. And we did this with 32-bit to 64-bit. We did it from desktop to mobile. We did it from monolithic to cloud. And we're probably going to have to do the same thing on AI as well. Rather than just retrofit it, can we go and do something that is deeply rooted in AI? And hence the word AI native. So as I said, we've seen this. We tried to do this with mobile web. Didn't work out. We said we need better, deeper experiences. Therefore, mobile native. We had monolithic applications, and we said maybe we can just lift and shift, and it wasn't to be. It was inefficient, it was not very economical, and we said we got to really rebuild this, and therefore cloud native. And in the world of workflows and collaboration, we've done pretty phenomenal job with Slack and Teams talking about human collaboration. But there's a lot of work ahead in terms of really saying how do agents collaborate with humans and what's the surface on which they collaborate. It's not just notifications, it's not just a bot coming in and adding something to a timeline. It's a lot more than that. It's also about redesigning the mobile app, but rethink search, because collaboration, you look at either of these, Slack or Teams, they've barely done anything around search, and search is a fairly profound topic. Google tried for like 10, 15 years to deliver search to the enterprise, and it's not easy. And anybody who just throws the word RAG probably doesn't know how hard the problem is. So we'll talk about some of these things as we speak about the platform itself. But what are the necessities of this? It has to be zapping fast. Anything that we do has to really run at the speed of human keystrokes. I mean, this idea of AI is about recommendations and suggestions and deflection and planning and routing, and all these ings that we talk about has to really run at the speed of human keystrokes. So we've got to be fast. We've got to really make it search first. And the word that, it took me a while to get comfortable with the word agentic, but there's such a word, agentic. You see a lot of research now about agentic, and I'm beginning to now get comfortable with it. Maybe we'll get Attila, who's our head of design, to also embrace it and say, yes, there is such a word called agentic. But it is about planning. It's about doing things, reasoning, and obviously the tactical ones like clustering and deduplicating and speculating. I think speculating will be a feature, and you'll see why. I think you'll see this more and more. We use the word knowledge graph. There's not just CRMs, but also work management tools. There's been a work management tool in every department. We have celebrated work, worked forward. Everything was work. And we stopped celebrating customers and product. So the knowledge graph that we've built is really rooted around customer and product. And we've hustled hard to really bring a lot of data from legacy systems into ours. And without this, we don't think there's real AI. Because if you're trying to do a lot of things by building AI projects, and I use the word project very deliberately, AI projects will require a lot of consulting, will require a lot of one-off things that we'll have to go and do to integrate with 17 different systems, and they will be fragile. So we make a case that you need to bring the data first, and until you bring the data and canonicalize it and really bring it, connect it all together between the customer, the product, the people, their work, the users, their activities, really hard problem building a knowledge graph. It requires ETL. This is a problem that was left to the readers, like, hey, you go figure out how to do pipelines and figure out things which are failing, and every day you have to observe the pipelines, make sure that every row comes in because every row matters. It's a hard problem that we feel has to be a part of the platform itself. You can't expect people in every AI project to go do this when it should be done right up front. Consistent labeling. The word labeling has been used in the realm of AI for the last 15 years at least. And we feel that customer is a label, but product is another label, and product is a deep hierarchy of what you really build requires labeling. And we call it the parts. Parts is capabilities of a product, features of a product, APIs of the product. All of these things will be required to label work. And without that, you can't do a great job of deflection or deduplication or routing or attribution or blaming, and all these ings will require very important things around product labels and customer labels and user labels as well, which I think the knowledge graph needs to be very good at. Crawling, I think most SaaS in the last 20 years has not been curious about crawling. Crawling the things that are around it, not just its own database, but things around it. In fact, I'm going to bring somebody I have a lot of respect for right after this, who's going to talk about this crisis of fractured organizations. We have a lot of best of breed and they don't talk to each other. But for them to talk to each other, they need to go be curious about what's out there, what's next to them. These are document folders, Notion, Google Docs, but also things that you need to connect to that you can bring back into your knowledge graph and extend your knowledge graph so that you can let AI really work efficiently. And there's a lot of these INGs, indexing, clustering, classifying, deduplicating, that requires real foundational thinking that needs to be part of a platform, as opposed to you trying to do this as an AI project. I think at the core of design is low latency, and it's a really hard problem. The reason why we started using Teams and Slack is because business software was slow, like awfully slow. And we said, well, we are really hooked to this idea that when somebody's typing, I can see them typing, and therefore I'm not going to leave. There's an attention that actually comes with when you're DMing someone on Slack or on Teams. And that is the biggest, I would say, fatal flaw of business software, that it's very slow. Anytime we wanted to collaborate, we needed to move out of business software and get into one of these collaboration tools. And therefore, you can't just retrofit AI on top of existing business software. That's the case that we're actually making, although we'll sit next to it for as long as we have to. But I think as a company, we feel like one of the tenets of design has to be low latency. And it's one of the hardest things to do right in business software is latency. Attention is another word that we are very passionate about. Things that matter to an enterprise are not generic keywords, generic terms, but the taxonomy, the ontology of the enterprise is important to understand. I mean, simple things like, we taught the call center people to just look at one folder because that folder had the right articles to really use to deflect, L1 calls when they're actually on a call. Now, if you give this to AI, it needs to understand what this isolation meant. The folder and the folder had isolation, and you only looked at this folder and didn't look at that folder. People who have global teams, global operations, they have basically done this idea of routing everybody to the right folder, to the right documents, in a way that required a lot of context, a lot of training. The question is, how do you do this with AI? Without attention, you can't. So you've got to really understand the enterprise's ontology, the taxonomy, and build context-aware search, which is a really hard problem. And again, there's horses for courses. There's a lot of terms and buzzwords being thrown around about prompt engineering and RAG pipelines and things of that nature. And you'll see that if you didn't do it right, I use the word left shift. You've got to left shift a lot of this opinion into an operating system, into a platform, so that what you do with a customer is actually going to be a lot more defined and controlled as opposed to services, which is something that's going to be extremely fragile and hard to maintain. So attention is an important word we look at. There's another thing that we talk about, which is essentialism. The idea that humans should do judgment and deep work while we leave shallow work to agents. Michael, he actually had a term. It's like, what's the tagline for DevRev? And one of the things that we're just doing with levity was, well, just don't do it. Because if you say just don't do it, it actually is like, what do you mean just don't do it? Well, the things that machines are good at doing now, so let them do it so that you can do deeper work and can invoke more judgment and really think about the hardest problems that we all should be solving for. Now, this will require a handoff. We are in a baton zone. It probably is a 10 to 15 to 20 year baton zone here. But the more we think about what human agents will be good at versus what AI agents will be good at, we'll actually be on the right path towards really making not just us more successful, but also bring some work-life balance, get our weeknights back. Forget about weekends, we'll actually get our weeknights back. And that might be one way to really reconcile with AI, as opposed to think of it as something that will take away jobs. I think we have to look at it as something that's conciliatory. It's like, well, at the very least, it's making me comfortable that I can have some work-life balance as well. Will be a great way to really bring AI agents and human agents together in one platform. So again, in the course of the next 3 hours, you'll see us talk about all these things and the case that there needs to be an operating system under the covers as well. We call it Agent OS. It needs to do a lot of things. We call them skills. Skills include search skills, and analytics is a very important skill. It's a really hard problem because to gather all this data in a cloud, in a multi-tenant way is a really hard problem. If you had to do it in a single-tenant platform, it's easier. But to really do this in a multi-tenant way is a really hard problem. SaaS companies, therefore, have never done data well. They've done their own data, but they've never done a good job of integrating all this data across all customers. The human handoff thing, I talked about this. We will be very, very pedantic if we said we're going to be completely making driverless cars. It's been 15 years since we've been talking about full self-driving. It's going to be like this with the enterprise as well. We probably never will be in that state for the next 15, 20 years. But if you can be practical about it, if you know exactly what should be done by agents, AI agents, and what should be handed off to humans, I think there's a really important handoff there, which requires immense design as well. So we'll make a case for that. I think multi-channel is important. You can't just do AI with chatbots. You have to do AI with every other channel as well, whether it's WhatsApp or email or Slack or mobile. So you have to actually really push AI down beyond just the chatbot into your operating system so that all channels can actually get the leverage of AI itself. Data governance is a big issue. We got a little comfortable in the last 10 years with customer data being in the cloud, but there's a lot of product data that people are still not comfortable with being in the cloud. Only in the last 3 years, maybe, the large enterprises started to put their code in the cloud, but product defect data is still something that they think hard about. Like, this is the crown jewel, and we don't want our competitors to get their hands on product defect data or understanding our roadmap and roadmap data. So product data and engineering data is one of the last bastions that needs to move to the cloud, but it actually has a lot of requirements of security and compliance. And last but not the least, I think we need to move really fast. The operating system has to move at experimentation speeds. So if the platform is not that good at really iterating, then we'll probably not do justice to all the work that's been done with these bigger, fancier models. I mean, I look at these models as batteries of a car. Obviously, at DevRev, we've taken a bigger responsibility of building a car, but the batteries are changing fast. The technology around the batteries is changing really fast. So we've thought a lot about designing a marketplace where we can co-create value and collaborate with our customers. What does it mean to really have public roadmaps, talk about APIs and webhooks, but also, there's new devices on the horizon, which will help us understand data, like the Vision Pro, for example, which will open up doors for visualization in ways that we've never seen before. So there's some very interesting work that we'll talk about over the course of the next 3 hours, but all of it will come down to getting innovators, who actually think about design not just from a product point of view, but also from process and organizational point of view. And we've seen some of this stuff. The whole idea of DevOps came about only in the last 10 years because we had to move at the speed of CI/CD, and then Cloud Ops because we had to really deal with cloud engineering. So there's going to be a bunch of people, organizational design that needs to also happen along the way. And some great companies that embraced, for example, cloud native early on, and that became a competitive advantage for them. It redefined companies, it redefined Netflix, redefined Capital One, redefined New York Times, and many, many others who actually became cloud native rather than just retrofitting cloud on the periphery itself.